Hi everyone, so for today's video, I will be touching on systematic racism in America, the industrial prison complex, and how it all ties into the Louisiana State Penitentiary. I feel like choosing such a specific place like some prison in Louisiana may seem very random, but it's not. So like 2 summers ago, I visited my extended family up in Northern California, and my cousin's fiance at the time, who is now her husband, brought politics to the dinner table, which is something like you're not supposed to do because controversy might hurt someone's feelings. But I'm really glad that he brought politics to the dinner table because he actually taught me a lot about racism in America. So one conversation that really stood out to me was when he said, "Did you know that there's still slavery in America?" And I'm like, what do you mean by that? Like, slavery should have ended back in the 19th century, like it's the 21st century. You're a little crazy. But turns out he's not that crazy because then he goes, the Louisiana State Penitentiary. And I say, go on. So then he goes on to teach me all about it. And when this final project thing was assigned, that was just something that I felt like I wanted to talk about because it's pretty crazy and not many people know about it. So yeah, without further ado, here is everything you need to know about the Louisiana State Penitentiary. The biggest case of institutionalized racism exists on land that was once the Angela Plantation. Originally at 8,000 acres, the plantation was named after the homeland of the slaves that reside there. Angola is a country on the African west coast that fell victim to the transatlantic slave trade of the United States. In the 1880s, the plantation was purchased by some rich white racist guy, and it soon became the James Prison Camp. He housed inmates in the old slave quarters and forced them to work on the plantation. After reports of brutality and violence against inmates, the state took over the prison in 1901. Thus, the Louisiana State Penitentiary was created and still held the horrors of slavery and racism within its walls. While researching the entire history of the penitentiary, it low-key felt like the entire land was like cursed because of how much bad shit happened there. So geographically, it's important to note that the penitentiary is bounded by 3 sides of the Mississippi River. The flood of 1922 from the river destroyed the crops on the plantation, which were the key source of funding for operation costs. After the severe floods, the Great Depression caused the facility to fall into even poorer shape. Following the Depression in 1951, the lack of quality of life led 31 inmates to slice their Achilles to publicize the brutality they had endured. Their call to action made the governor of Louisiana promise to make serious renovations to the penitentiary. But his promise was not upheld because leading into the 1960s, the Louisiana State Penitentiary was named the bloodiest prison in the South because its crime rates were more than 3 times higher than any prison in the North. Now, after years of reform, the facility is still one of the largest maximum security prisons in all of America. And so, after quickly summarizing the dark history of this place, many of you may still be wondering why and how the story of the Angela Plantation and State Penitentiary is even racist at all. Still today, the state of Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in all of America. Or should I say, like, one of the highest incarceration rates in the entire world. Yeah, that graph is kind of scary. Anyways, before I go into some statistics, here are some definitions to go over. So when talking about Louisiana's industrial prison complex, it is the profit-driven relationship between the government, the private companies that build, manage, supply, and service prisons, and it's regarded as the cause of increased incarceration rates. It's a clear example of how the government and the industry are interdependent of each other. But they weren't intended to rehabilitate just anyone. Those programs were reserved for people that they deemed capable, which when I say that, they were reserving that for white people. Incarcerated Black Americans and other people of color were looked over in those programs to benefit from it, and they were used. There's evidence to back that up because studies shown from those programs for the prison industrial complex show almost no record of Black Americans or any American other than just white people. And so another big takeaway from this video is to understand what industrial racism is. Also known as systemic racism, it is a form of oppression that is embedded in the laws and regulations of a society or an organization. It manifests as discrimination in areas such as criminal justice, employment, healthcare, education, and political representation. And lastly, I'd like to talk about some statistics to back up my claims on how the prison industrial complex is racist, seeing the example from the Angola plantation or Louisiana State Penitentiary. And so going back to this troubling graph, let me break down some statistics on some demographics and incarceration rates. In the state of Louisiana, Black people constitute 33% of the population, but 52% of people in jail and 67% of people in prison. And Louisiana has the nation's highest rate of life without parole sentencings. When bringing these statistics to a nationwide scale, Black men constitute for about 13% of the male population, but about 35% of those men are incarcerated. Finally, going back to what my cousin's husband taught me, it's important to note that America is no stranger to institutional racism. And if somebody asks you, well, what is systemic racism? What is the prison industrial complex? How is American policing racist? Does slavery actually still exist in our country? You can simply answer their questions with a simple phrase: the Louisiana State Penitentiary, or the Angola Plantation. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, I'm sorry if it was a little boring. I was just rewatching it and my voice sounds very monotone, but that's just because it's dead. So yeah, thanks, like and subscribe.